Hello, my name is Graham Barrett. Welcome to the C-Suite podcast. This is the latest episode in our Beyond the Stage series, where we speak with the people behind some of the biggest trade shows and conferences in the world. For this episode, we're focusing on Money2020, the world's leading fintech show, which now spans events in Europe, the USA, the Middle East and Asia. And our particular focus here today is on Money2020 Europe, which takes place every year in early June at the RAI in Amsterdam. And that's because I'm joined by Bryony Naylor, who is the VP Europe at Money2020. Bryony, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Graham. Thank you.
No, not at all. Now, we know this event very well at the C-Suite podcast. We've been to 11 of your events across those different geographies that I mentioned, and also the last 5 in Europe. But for anyone who hasn't been, how would you describe Money2020 and what makes it such a pivotal event?
I guess Money2020 Europe in a nutshell is a ecosystem event. We bring together all of the financial services ecosystem under one roof. And it really is all about networking, all about hearing the latest trends, hearing the things that are shaping the industry at the moment. And I mean, you know yourself from having attended 5, I mean, that's pretty good going, that, you know, each year there is usually an overriding theme that shows itself, and this industry moves so fast. So it is, every year feels very different. It's actually, I've worked now for the brand for nearly 10 years. So I feel like every single one I've done has been different. And I think what makes it so special is, whilst payments and banking are at its core, we really see the rise. Like this year, we saw a big rise in decentralized finance, for instance, at the show, as we saw that kind of convergence with TradFi. You know, and every year when AI in 2023 was booming with agentic AI and agentic commerce, you know, we tend to see that kind of fluctuate as the industry moves. So it definitely tries to keep its finger on the pulse.
And what about this year in particular? So we're having this conversation in early July. It's been about, 6 weeks since you delivered the show. What were some of the standout successes for you?
I think this year it really felt like it was about the industry moving forward. It felt like there was a real shift from kind of experimentation into implementation. And I think we really saw that with some of the big announcements that happened on the stage. You know, the EPI talked about European sovereignty. We know that that's obviously a big topic right now, especially for the European market. So I think, you know, it was, I mentioned it before, that kind of convergence of traditional finance with decentralized finance. We were obviously coming into the show after MasterCard had announced that they were acquiring BVNK. You know, there was a real movement into how people are implementing and what they're doing to do that with AI, with DeFi. So I think it was a big shift this year, actually.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point, actually. What kind of shapes those themes and conversations then? Because obviously some of it is dictated by the companies who have live news to share. And obviously, I guess you need to persuade them to share the news at your show. But then there must also be industry themes that, you know, that the latest things going on that you tap into as well.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's interesting that the content team are in it right now for next year's show, but they do a bunch of industry research calls in the summer period. They do about over 100, and it helps us shape what the agenda and what the themes look like. So we had 4 key themes at Europe this year. One was the great rebundling. So as we see that kind of fragmentation that was happening over the last 5 years or so, actually them bringing it back in and being a sort of one-stop shop. We saw Money Stack Rewired. Obviously, saw that a lot, you know, with that DeFi, TradFi, regulation as a strategic advantage. You know, we talked about it earlier. You know, I touched on it earlier with European sovereignty. You know, we're seeing that happen, and then obviously AI and the rise of the agentic age. You know, things like that. We kind of had those 4 pillars that we then put all of our content into those topics.
Now, you tell me, but it always seems that Money 2020 is trying to do something different with each of the shows that we go to. Was there anything in particular about this year's show that kind of stood out for you from a new perspective, from something kind of fresh you were trying to deliver?
Yeah, I mean, I think this will probably come up quite a bit in this interview, but that piece on the convergence of TradFi DeFi, we actually had a stage specifically dedicated to that called the intersection, where we were exploring those topics. And actually, the team led by Scarlett Sieber, our Chief Strategy and Growth Officer, actually wrote a book called The Intersection of Money, where TradFi and DeFi converge, and they launched it on site in Europe. So they did a session on it and then a book signing. But it was captured one of the defining themes, I think, of this year, that growing interoperability. And then I think, we touched on it as well, around strategic announcements. We saw MoneyGram, Emo and Stellar launching MGUSD. We saw Worldline, MasterCard, ING with the first European production-ready agentic payments flow. So I think, there were some really big moments, big strategic announcements that shaped, I think, a lot of what the rest of the agenda focused on.
Let's move on to the speaker lineup, because that's always a big draw for any event, but again, maybe in particular for Money 2020. In your opinion, what makes a great Money 2020 speaker?
I think it has to be that you haven't heard it before. That you haven't heard them talk on that topic before, or that you haven't heard that viewpoint. So one of the great formats that we introduced this year was the big debates. And actually, it was something new that we hadn't really done at any show before, where we had it's quite hard to find a panel of conflicting opinions nowadays.
Yeah.
It tends to be everyone agreement soup kind of thing. But actually, there was some really great ones. There was a particularly a great debate on stablecoins that was the last piece of content on day 3 of the show, on the Thursday of the show, and the stage was packed. It's always amazing to see that, people still going strong at like 3 p.m. on the last day of the show. And I think, as well, we heard from some industry titans that don't necessarily speak or don't necessarily do the kind of the tour of other events. So we had like Marguerite from ABN AMRO, we had Yoni from eToro. There were some amazing speakers that you just don't get the chance to see. And actually, one of my big highlights was we had BBVA back speaking as a keynote speaker. Now, the last time we had them speaking was in 2019, as a keynote. So that again felt like a really big kind of round moment. And Seb from Klarna, he spoke at our first Money 2020 Europe in 2016. So 10 years later, back talking with Takis from Fiserv. So there were just some amazing speakers, and I think it is about pushing the industry forward and what they are doing, within their businesses, within their roles, and how that shapes the future of the financial services ecosystem, I think.
I guess once you become an established event that's been around for years, and you can not only track those individuals and have them back on the show, but I guess also the companies as well. Some of them would have come to Money 2020 for the first time as startups, and then suddenly they're these huge companies.
Yeah, exactly. We did a whole piece of work. So startups is a big focus for us. We actually did a bit of research into like the top 30 European unicorns and how many of them had spoken. And we had all of them speaking very early in their journey, around the Series B, Series A of their funding rounds. So that was quite an incredible moment, actually, to look at that.
Now, as well as the speakers, obviously Money 2020 is known for the experience as well, what goes on, aside from those talks. How do you think about delivering that experience for the people who come to the shows?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've talked a lot about the agenda and we've talked a lot about the speakers. That's definitely a big part of it. But I think also it's about how do we curate the feel and the look of the show as well that is conducive to networking and to meeting people. It's yes, it's about the stages and about the content on those stages, but it's also about those conversations that you have in a corridor, or that you bump into somebody at Street Fest. Who you haven't seen for a couple of years, and it sparks up, a new partnership. So I think we really give a lot of thought to how the audience, the delegates get ROI from our event. And I think, for us, it's about how do we make that as easy as possible, be that through the app, being able to kind of set up a meeting with somebody in the Connections Lounge, or to, run a demo on their stand, things like that. There are so many different ways that we really try and make those connections happen and deliver on ROI.
But there's certainly, as a company and as a podcast that goes to a lot of these events, certainly the evening events are markedly different at Money 2020 than any others. So, what other event has something like Street Fest that you just mentioned? So who kind of comes up with those ideas? Where does that come from? How hard are you trying to be different in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're lucky with Street Fest. I mean, we've done Street Fest since we moved to Amsterdam in 2018. But we really do think about how we ensure that there's a bit of fun in the event as well. You've been stuck in an expo hall all day, talking all day. How do we continue that bit in a different environment that allows you to kind of perhaps let your hair down a little bit, but make sure that you are making those connections. And one of the things I'm thinking about now, for instance, is next year, what do we do about our Wednesday night? So for the last 2 years, we've held it within the Rye, and we've had some amazing DJs. We had Annie Mac last year. We had DJ Yoda this year. How do we mix that up and keep people on their toes and keep things fresh and ensure that, I think when people are paying a lot of money for their delegate ticket, and they are, we know that it's not just the price that they're paying us to attend the show. It's all of the travel, all of the hotels and the subsistence and things like that. We've got to make sure that we're really delivering on ROI, and we're really maximizing those 3 days for our delegates and sponsors. So it's something that, we run a survey post-event. I'm just about to get the results from this year's events, and we use the feedback from that to help us shape what we need to tweak, what we need to change, what people want to see more of. One of the bits of feedback we got last year was people wanted to see more deep dive content, and they wanted more audience participation. So we actually changed our off-the-record stage into the Money Lab this year, which was a 40-person format, which was all about deep dive content, but that encouraged audience participation. So encouraged questions, encouraged them to directly engage with the speakers, and that seemed to go down really well this year. So we do kind of try and take on board the feedback and adapt as we go each year.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's one way to get people more engaged, isn't it? Feel more part of the conference as well, I
Yeah.
guess. Yeah. Well, you mentioned a bit of the planning there. You're thinking about next year. So that leads me on to the next question about when does this all start? When do you start thinking about next year's show? I guess it's already begun, as you say.
Yeah, I mean, crazily, it's funny, for anyone that doesn't work in the events industry, to tell them, no, I spend my whole year thinking
Yes,
about
exactly, yeah.
the next year event. So yes, we've already begun the research calls. We've already begun thinking about like what we're going to do differently. But I think actually that's the beauty as well of Money 2020 is we've got Middle East coming up in September in Riyadh, and then Vegas in October, at the end of October. So we never stop. It's always, on to the next one and what we're doing next. And I think the wonderful thing about each show as well is it has its own unique flavour. And, obviously by proxy of the geography that it's serving. But I think, that does it adds to that, the build up towards each show. There's on to the next one always.
And again, I suppose picking up on your point about people who don't work in the industry might not know the behind the scenes stuff, the planning stuff. What are some of the biggest challenges of, delivering an event of this scale?
I think keeping it fresh and really thinking about, what you're going to do differently and making sure that you're staying on the pulse, because we said it earlier, this industry moves so fast, and what's relevant one year it will be totally different next year. I mean, where are NFIs now and things like that, that we were talking about not that long ago. It doesn't feel that long ago. I think actually it's about ensuring that we are engaging with the industry as much as possible, and that we are facilitating that as much as possible. So, like, one of the things that we do now, for instance, is we for our speaker lineup, we have a call for content process that is a 1 month window where we open and we ask for people to put forward their submissions for the content that they would like to speak on. And we actually now host a call for content unplugged evening when the call for content opens, which will be in November. And we actually host it in our office, and we're going to run some little workshops and things like that on like how to put together a good panel and things like that, so that we are ensuring that the companies who spend a lot of time and effort putting forward suggestions for the call for content, that they are going to have the best amount of success in what they do put forward. So we're constantly trying to think of ways of engaging with the industry to ensure that we kind of stay on the pulse, really.
And is there one thing amongst all of that that people might not know about putting on a show like this, or might underestimate the importance of?
I mean, it takes a huge team. That probably doesn't surprise you. I think the thing that makes us a little bit unique as well is that we have a creative team, and their job is literally, so they sit separately to our operations team, to the ones kind of delivering the end-to-end event that you see and everything like that. But they are there thinking about how do we what the experience of the delegate and the sponsors. And actually, I've seen that, especially from being, working on Money20 for such a long time. We brought that in just before COVID, and we then worked with an agency called Sid Lee on the layout of the floor plan. So one of the things that we had before we worked with them was a very like grid-like system where we had our stages very separate, our food hall was even separate, and we worked with this agency about how do we make the expo kind of the heart of it, and have everything hugging that. And it's really changed. It's why we've got our circular floor plan. It's why we've got the circular walkways and things like that, because it just encourages you then to go and experience new things that you might not have otherwise seen if you just kind of walk that central aisle and that was all you'd done. And we think about then the little flashes of experience. So like I don't know if you saw the Money Bot this year, but we had upgraded our merch machine, and we now have a chief merch officer, which is this little robot, money bot, that you chose. You collect coins around the show, and you then traded your coins in for a piece of merch. And the robot came out with your merch. So there's like little things like that just are that kind of surprise and delight piece.
What about personal highlights for you in particular, Bryony? So, as you said, you've been working on this show for a number of years now. What have been some of the highlights along the way?
Yeah, so I mean, my background's always been commercial. So I led the commercial teams for the last 7 years, and this was my first show in this position. So I moved into it in September, and actually, I coming from a commercial background is really helpful because I know a lot of the clients already. I've worked with them firsthand, and know them to kind of say hello to and or pick up the phone to if I need to sense check something. But I think actually it's just, especially getting under the skin of the marketing and, our operations team, that you just wouldn't even know how much work goes into it. We have a full 3-day build before anyone even comes onto the show floor. And, when you come on site on the Tuesday, 9 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, I'm like, it's like the elves and the shoemakers, you leave on a Monday night and you're like, this is never going to be ready. And then, you get on site on a Tuesday and it looks the way it does. So I think a personal highlight for me has definitely been having that 360 view and just, working on that. And I think one of the things that we've really tried to do this year is engage a bit more with the Dutch government, with Amsterdam in general. And one of the ways that we've done that is through our Money20 program, where we bring together regulators, central banks, some private into the mix. And it was a closed door 40-person 3 round tables. And that we've taken that from last year, which was still kind of very much at its core about policy and regulators, to this year, where we had ministers of finance in attendance and directors of central banks and things like that. So I think that's been really exciting to see. And then we also hosted a Day Zero event at the Dutch Central Bank in collaboration with the Ministry of Finance, the Netherlands Foreign Investment Agency, TechLeap, and obviously the DNB. And it's just so cool seeing stuff like that, that you kind of have an idea that we should be working a bit more with them. And then when it does actually happen, it's always a proud moment.
Yeah. What about the flip side as well? What are some of the more stressful moments you've had over the years?
Oh, I mean, I shouldn't really talk about them,
apart
should
from
I?
every day, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, nothing is more stressful than that last month run up to the show, and especially that last week where that there's nothing you can do now. It's just, everything's going to happen the way it's going to happen, and you've done everything that you possibly can. But that is also, that stress and excitement. You've then got that thing of, I'm going to be on site in a week's time and I'm going to see it all come to fruition. So it does balance out a little bit, yeah.
And what about when you shut the doors then? I guess there's a big sigh of relief. What's the first thing you do then?
So we have a big staff party that weirdly always involves karaoke. That's become like a Money 2020 tradition. So if you didn't have a voice at the end of the show, you certainly didn't by the next morning. But in all seriousness, we then go into planning. So we then go into, like I said, we do a survey. So we collect all the survey results and start to look into that. We move into research phase, and I think it's a really important foundation, especially before, we don't launch straight back into selling delegate tickets. That doesn't launch until September. So it gives us a chance to really kind of feel for what we've got to do better and what we've got to change. And actually, this bit's really exciting because it's this bit where you're getting everybody on that journey with you so that we're all aligned. So it's then like when we do go out to the market, we're singing from the same hymn sheet and saying the same thing. So it's definitely pick yourself up, dust yourself off and go again moment. Yeah.
And talk to me a little bit more about that evaluation process as well. What does success look like, especially for an event that has been, so well established and, goes very well most years, I would imagine. So how do you measure it and how do you look back and know which bits worked and which bits didn't?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, this was our 10th anniversary. We launched in Copenhagen in 2016, and then we moved to the Rye in Amsterdam in 2018. So it's we've been running now for for a long time, or, in the grand scheme of things. But I think, for us, it's about, we do a rebook on site to our specs clients, to our sponsorship clients, who then rebook for next year. And that's always a really good indicator of like how well they think the show has gone. And so we use that as a bit of a marker. We obviously do an NPS. So that's, your attractors, your passives and your detractors. And we look at that. And then I think, as well, we do ROI calls with every single one of our specs clients, measuring how the show has gone against what they wanted to get out of it. And that's a really important part of us doing better, and building year on year. We have some clients that have been with us since 2016, and that retention is a really important part, and a good indicator for us of we're doing the right thing. We're doing something right.
And let's just finish up by talking about what's next. Clearly, you're in the planning process for next year's event, but now look a little bit further afield. Where do you think Money 2020 Europe can go?
I think, look, we are, at a real moment, especially, banks. We've got to make sure that we are building on our banking audience. So that's a big focus for me over the next year. We introduced something called Smart Meet at the show this year, which was our matchmaking meeting service, where we had banks kind of as our buyers, and then our sellers were anyone that wanted to sell to them. And we had about 200 or so buyers in that category. So we want to grow that more for next year and future years ahead. Banking audience is so important to the ecosystem that we serve. And look, I think there are some really exciting things happening in other geos as well. We saw a really big rise from Africa at this year's event, and as well as Central and Eastern Europe. So focus now is like, how do we build out that so that we really are a pan-European serving the European ecosystem?
Yeah, well, that's great. Yeah, listen, as the C-Suite podcast, we've enjoyed coming to the event over the years. I think it was 47 interviews we recorded at this year's event. Yeah, it's been great, and we look forward to the future shows. But I think that's all for now. So Bryony Naylor, VP Europe at Money 2020 Europe, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Graham. Thank you.
No problem at all. And that is a wrap for this episode of Beyond the Stage. I really hope you've enjoyed this conversation with myself and Bryony. And if you have, then please do give us a positive rating and review. And of course, do follow us on your podcast app of choice. If you'd like to get in touch with the show, you can do that via the contact form at csuitepodcast.com, or you can find me, Graham Barrett, on LinkedIn. But for now, thank you for listening, and goodbye.